PhD journey is a rewarding and challenging experience. Years of research, presenting papers, and writing multiple drafts is an intense and demanding process. Completing the final draft and defending the thesis at Viva, however, is only the end of that particular phase of our academic careers and the beginning of the next. This webinar will serve as an educational tool for all PhD students and early career researchers planning or embarking on their first manuscript.
So my name is Miranda Corcoran, and I am a lecturer in 21st century literature in University College Cork in the English department. So they will usually ask for things, quite obvious things like a breakdown, a synopsis of the publication, what you're going to focus on, what the kind of key topics are going to be, the scope of the project. They'll usually ask for a sort of a short blurb or an abstract. So a kind of, again, a very brief summary of what you're going to talk about. And then they'll look for a more detailed chapter breakdown of what each chapter is going to include. So all of those things I think are pretty obvious. And I think for postgrads and early career scholars who have, completed or are in the process of completing a PhD thesis, who have applied for funding with groups like the IRC, a lot of that might be quite familiar, that idea of, a short, we'll say lay abstract, a breakdown of the project and what it includes. Some of the more kind of specific elements is for a monograph, for a book publication, is that they will usually ask you questions about your proposed audience and your proposed readership, which is something that maybe many postgrads and early career scholars won't have encountered previously. So they'll usually ask you, who is your proposed readership? Who will be reading this book? But they're also looking to see if there are any other kind of competing works. So, how original is the book that you're planning to produce? Is there a book on the exact same topic, or are there books on similar topics? So they're looking for that kind of element of originality, that your book is bringing something new to the field. But I also kind of get the feeling that they're also trying to determine, is your book completely out there? Is it completely like bonkers, or does it fit within an established tradition of scholarship? So it's a weird kind of fine line that I think you need to walk with the proposal, where on the one hand, you need to show that your book does fit within an established kind of discipline and established tradition of scholarship, while also bringing something new to the table.
I'm Maria Ryan, and I'm an associate professor of US history in the Department of American and Canadian Studies at the University of Nottingham. I think there are intellectual differences, and then there are also commercial considerations that make it different. And I think when you're producing a book manuscript, the literature review is going to be much shorter. There's a lot less academic signposting. Most publishers really see that as being kind of unnecessary, actually. Then I think there needs to be enough for readers to understand what's original about your contribution, but there doesn't need to be a really detailed analysis of what everybody else has written on the topic, something much more brief than what you've written in your PhD introduction, I think is okay. So, when you're writing your PhD, you need to demonstrate to your PhD examiners that you have read and understood what everybody else has written on your topic. But that is not considered necessary for a book. I mean, you can present a much more abbreviated version of that for a book. And some people also like to add new research to the book manuscript. There might be things that they didn't have a chance to research for their PhD that they want to add in to the book. So I think that there are some intellectual differences between a PhD thesis and a book manuscript. But what you will also come up against when you're writing a book is commercial considerations. You basically have to convince a commissioning editor that your research is marketable, and that it's worth the financial investment that they will need to make in order to publish the book. So when you apply to do a PhD, you don't have to convince us that your research is going to be marketable. You just have to convince us that it's important and original. But your publisher is going to have a budget for each book, which is going to translate into a certain number of pages, which is going to translate into a particular word limit. And the budget has to cover things like the copy editing and the marketing and the printing of the book. And you need to convince them that there is going to be a market for your book that's big enough for them to be able to make their money back, essentially. And in my experience, I think that commissioning editors, I think they do have a real interest in the field that they work in. They do have a real appreciation for the field that they're commissioning in. But their job is also to think about the commercial aspect of publishing and how to market the intellectual work that you're doing.
Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Andelic. I'm an assistant professor of American history at Northumbria University in Newcastle upon Tyne. Well, with one of the big advantages with academic presses, as opposed to, say, trade presses, whether you're approaching them in the UK, Ireland, or the US, is that you can just approach them cold. If you're approaching a trade press, you may need an agent, for example, which is a whole different kettle of fish. But you can, in fact, just reach out to any academic press. Every university press will have a section on their website with guidelines, sort of submission guidelines for new authors. And so you are more than welcome to just kind of put together a proposal and to send it to them. That's what I did with mine, actually. But in retrospect, that maybe wasn't the best strategy. And I think one of the most sensible things to do actually is to make contact with an acquisitions editor first. And there are two reasons for that. One is that it can save you a lot of time. If you figure out who the editor is in your relevant area, just make contact with them. Just send them a quick email and say, this is the book that I'm working on. Is this something that you in theory, you'd be interested in? Would you like to see a more developed proposal? They can give you a steer. They can save you a lot of time. Yeah, it's kind of tricky actually, because in some respects they're not actually that different. I don't think one of the main differences is that they have very different referencing practices. What I would say is whether you're publishing in the UK or in Ireland or in the US, is to kind of think about for example, distribution processes of these presses. Like, where exactly is this press going to place your book? Where is it going to sell it? Where is it going to try and advertise it? Particularly, obviously I'm very kind of, speaking to my own kind of experience, if you're, say, a historian of the United States or you work on US politics or something related, and you want to publish with a UK or an Irish press, you'd want to ask them, okay, how are you going to distribute this in the United States? How is this going to get noticed by US scholars? And some UK Irish presses have very good networks. So yeah, it's simply a difference there.